a biennial event emerged as an opportunity for us to educate and engage the population, a population that is very aware of its immigrant identity. Developing its hubs with grocery stores and restaurants and ethnic clothing stores, yet not engaged enough in the larger community and unfamiliar with or alienated by contemporary art. Contemporary postmodernist discourse has very little relevance to this population. The elitism in art is at odds with the traditional understanding and appreciation of arts. This project is aimed to bridge those differences. Development of understanding and appreciation of creative process demands a tangible and approachable connection between the public, the artists, and curators. We want the DemoGraphics project to be the catalyst that will energize the public to actively become involved with contemporary art. As an organization that has built its audience from ground up, we at CCAI are mindful that creative activity cannot be controlled by one's vision alone. It is an organic development and needs to flow and grow with its audience. DemoGraphics has evolved over the last 4 years to where it is now, with the help of my partner, co-director Yvonne Singer, and the amazing curator Chantal Ponprian. And I'm hoping that with the vision of our curatorial team and the hard work of the organization, it will envelop the entire GTA to come together in a creative process that shares, mentors, and supports an experience to cultivate the sense of arts in the communities. This vision needs the support of our artists, curators, our media corporations, our governmental and non-profit sector, and our citizens. We aim to bring our national and international artists together for a communal and social experience in artistic development. We aspire to curate the spirit of immigration that pulls people from all around the world to claim GTA as their new home. It is a salute to their adventurous spirit and a resounding gratitude to the hospitality of our native Canadians who have made it possible for us to live in their lands. As large art events evolve around the world, the safe, subsidized Canadian culture seems uncomfortably inadequate and unnaturally out of touch with its environment and its inability to embark on engagement with its immigrant community, the very one it needs in order to survive as the leading economy, is another area addressed in this dialogue. It is not going to get any easier as we are led through the new changes in citizenship and immigration regulations. This just had to be added because that is something which is a very a big concern for all of us at this time. New questions arising would shape the theme of 2017 when we present Demographics 1 as we celebrate 150th anniversary of Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, this event is an effort to bring back the very passion that drove the madness of art. Thank you very much.
I fell upon this fantastic quote of Jacques Derrida, which I felt somehow coalesced my thinking about contemporary art and how to do something as a curator, as a writer, as an editor, or even maybe as an artist with the contemporary situation. So it's a bit long, but I'll read it because I think it's really powerful and it will really be at the core of the methodology that will be behind doing demographics. So hospitality is culture itself and not simply one ethic amongst others, insofar as it has to do with the ethos, that is the residence, one's home, the familiar place of dwelling, inasmuch as it is a matter of being there, the manner in which we relate to ourselves and to others as our own or as foreigners. Ethics is hospitality. Ethics is so thoroughly coextensive with the experience of hospitality. But for this very reason, and because being at home with oneself supposes a reception or inclusion of the other, which one seeks to appropriate, control, and master according to different modalities of violence, there is a history of hospitality an always possible perversion of the law of hospitality, which can appear unconditional, and of the laws which come to limit and condition it in its inscription as a law. The Greater Toronto Area. Maybe a few people who don't exactly know what that means. So it's quite large. And well, as you see, the region where we are in right now, the Peel and Halton regions to the left of the city, to the left of the city of Toronto, the regions will be very nevralgic in this project since they come from people who are citizens of this region. But it does not mean that the project will be all about Mississauga or only about Mississauga and Halton, Peel and Halton, excuse me. But it originates here, and I'm very, in a way, proud that an international art event would stem from a region that comes out of Canada as a different country today. What does demographics mean? First of all, let's deal with the demo in demographics. Demo comes from demos, an ancient Greek word, which means the common people. So demo is all about democracy, this idea of being together. How can we be together at this point in time? And it's something I think that will lie at the, really at the, will be underlying in this effort of doing an international art event here. How can we think out questions of democracy, the positive side and the negative side? Graphics is also an ancient Greek word. It comes from graphikos, and it means something written. Graphics is everything we do in the visual arts, of course, from writing, and you'll see in Dora Garcia's exhibition at the power plant how writing is important in contemporary art today. Writing, painting, gesture, drawing, photography, printmaking, etching, cartography, computer graphics, web graphics, symbols. We see graphics in all spheres of life, so we can imagine that DemoGraphics will be about all spheres of life and incorporate all spheres of life also. There's three things in demographics, which I call the DHS of demographics instead of the ADN. DHS, D for the demography of GTA that will be taken into account, H for hospitality, S for dynamics of sharing. The event will be held in participating venues, institutions, but all over the Greater Toronto Area, but also in places where people live, hang out, public libraries, schools, shops, airport, churches, empty lots, vacant spaces, abandoned buildings, and people's houses. It's an event to invite the world in, bring the international to the international in this case, because as I said, most cities that do international art events, it's to bring the international to them. Well, here, the international is already here, so we're just bringing in the international to meet the international in this case. The dynamics of sharing, which is the third point of our DNA, is ADN in French, I said before, is the dynamics of sharing. Demographics will be a letter from the people, not a letter to the people. An event to be held in participating venues, but also in places where people live, work, and entertain themselves. As I was saying, essentially a place to exercise demos.
We have to think of curating as a very active component in the whole art production process. And the production of art as a knowledge production becomes a central event and question. Above all, the question, well, if it is a form of knowledge production, what kind of knowledge does art and the curatorial process produce? What is the nature of this knowledge? Is a question and a prickly one that we would have to examine, especially in the larger context of the knowledge economy and the smart economy and smart notions of knowledge that we find in society today. I think for this reason, I would want to see in such an event, ideally as somebody who comes from the academic world to some extent, I would want to see what role the art schools and the art departments of the universities might play in structuring such an event. This is not an event only for administrators and critics and curators centered in art galleries and museums. This is also an opening for the places of production of art, and the art schools and art universities in Toronto, Ontario University, York University are the ones I know at first hand to some extent, are the ones that I would imagine would have a vital role to play in shaping and in giving the particular stamp of Toronto to this sort of event. So what kind of a space is the international event, the Biennale space? This indeterminate space, it seems to me, is where a new demos comes into being, a new gathering, a fresh gathering and a fresh interaction of people. Who are the people who gather in a Biennale or international art event space? They are anybody and nobody. They are casual visitors, they are ardent art critics, students, and members of the public. We don't know who they are. We cannot help but be reminded that by demographics we do mean writing the people in movement. And where better than in some respects Canada, where the ancient ancestral world of the indigenous people, the Métis, the Inuit, this ancestral world, which reminds us of the old continuing migrations and movements, right through to the contemporary ones. This is what I call the Paleolithic present. And in this respect, the Paleolithic present for me is one of the most important ways in which I would want to unpack the demographics as a concept in the context of Mississauga, Oakville. Thank you.
Thank you.
In determining the motivations for demographics, what might take precedent for institutional involvement? On the one hand, are we here to facilitate new ways to generate artistic forms and to create new ideas and new knowledge? Or is the institutional involvement there to help stimulate regional economic development?
I think there's lots of opportunity with projects like this for institutions to collaborate, but the key thing is always the thing we talk about at the AGO, where I've been for just over 2 years, but other organizations I've worked with, is, you know, and as an independent artist or curator, or when I was running with a colleague, Lisa Hermer, Dodo Lab, the research project, it always came back to, if we partnership, like if we form a partnership with someone else, like what can we bring to it? How is our involvement benefiting the project, and and also in return? One of the great challenges for us at the AGO is to make sure that, and I think like many big public institutions or galleries or community-based, it's that you don't want to be just seen as a venue for something. You want to be seen as a place where that's a thinking, breathing, living place. And so for us, it's always about, when we hear about initiatives like DemoGraphics going on, the first question we ask ourselves is, well, who's involved? What are the goals? What are the values of the project? What are the foundations of it? Do they match with our foundations? Or is there a way for us to work together where we can bring something to it that perhaps is missing, right? And then we also, want to ask questions about where there might be duplication already, or we may be aware of many other initiatives going on that the people organizing something new aren't aware of. So I think there's lots of ways to engage. There's just colleagues in a community to also potential partners, right?
In terms of partnership, I would reiterate what Andrew said. It's like, what is our mandate? What are we doing already? And how this project or the potential of a collaboration could fit within the vision and mandate of our institution, so that, especially if you're thinking of a partnership in an exhibition, prospect, or could it be with another department of the gallery, meaning could it be through some of the public programs that we're already doing, or can they be a partnership that meets something we wanted to do but couldn't do for many different reasons, and henceforth this new partnership can enable both parties to realize something concrete.
How can the institutional voices help differentiate DemoGraphics from the many other biennials, regular exhibitions, triennials, now being presented nationally and internationally?
We know our audience as well. That's imperative to us. We've spent a long time not just building those relationships, but working to understand what it is our audiences want, what the concerns are of our local communities. And I think that's somewhere that institutional voices can play a role in terms of how the conversation unfolds, or how a project like this takes shape, is speaking directly to the needs, wants, desires, complexities of our respective communities.
Is there a model that would address your needs as an institution and your relationships that you have with your audience, and participating in sort of this larger community of projects? One
of the questions you'd asked us to think about in preparing for today is the relationship between valuing an institutional perspective versus a curatorial perspective. And my thoughts on that are that the curatorial strength of the event, from our point of view, is what's most important institutionally. Embodying knowledge production, artistic excellence, audience engagement, those things are essential. That meets the mandate, or that meets our institutional objectives. And so if that means that it's not one of our curators, for example, being involved in the project, but working with the team of the curatorial team that is realizing the project, and at Documenta, they have agents, right? So the curatorial team have agents who engage in conversation around how the project comes together. I think there's probably a model there where there is a cohesive team that perhaps isn't institutionally grounded, but that's engaged in conversation with the various institutions around our audiences, around our mandates, to find some overlap between the needs of a project like this and the needs of our respective institutions.
How do you address, on the one hand, your curatorial goals, your mandate within the institution, with a community coming forward and saying, can you help us, or can you partner with us to address a specific theme or a specific issue?
If we take the case of demographic, it would be like, which community is asking us to be working with them, and are we part of that community or not? If it's the greater GTA, then of course we are part of the greater GTA.
My responsibility at the AGO is both to be part of a culture of a large organization where we all work together, we're all present, we all support each other, we're all engaged. But I also have a very specific responsibility in heading the Canadian department, which has expanded in its scope from my predecessors. So I can articulate a very clear focus for the Canadian program at this time.
If you want to call it a biennial, demographics, whatever you want to call it, a big initiative, I often say to organizers and to funders, do not, and I say this at the ROM all the time to my superiors and to my colleagues, let's not create the box. If we are working with artists, and I privilege artists and creators and thinkers, they are the creators. Let them create the box. Don't come to me with a box and expect us to fill it.
Things don't happen alone, and I'm really grateful for all the participation that we've had today, because it's a good indication that we'll get participation from all the different actors in the greater Toronto area that is necessary to pull off this very ambitious and very important project, as I said before, not just for the Toronto area, but for Canada, which really needs more attention at this point.
The reason why we invited the institutional voices, ROM, AGO, and these organizations was one specific reason, and that was that when in 2011, when I attended a meeting in Toronto about a biennial event, all of the heads of these organizations were there, and they've been on that committee for the last 10 years. Nothing has happened. And today you learned why it didn't happen. Institutional heads have the first priority to their own institutions. They cannot go out looking for funding for a project like Toronto Biennial. They have to first look at their own institution. And that was the purpose of bringing them him. Tom Smart was amazing in exactly pointing out those points and asking those pertinent questions, so that people understand that in presence of these institutions, why this type of project has not taken up so far. So that is where role of a non-for-profit organization, arts organization, that has a proven record like our own, comes in forefront. By comparison, where we can take this project and in collaboration with other organizations, make it a reality.
I just want to add that what I learned today, this afternoon particularly, when I heard the people on the institutional panel, is that I think Mississauga and Peel and the region have reached a certain level of maturity, which is reflected in their desire to make culture an integral part of their planning and their infrastructure. And I think that is only going to be beneficial to demographics.